Luis Sola, Chairman of the Federal Maritime Commission, thank you for joining us for your first interview as Chairman here on State of Freight.
Glad to be here. Thank you very much.
Great. So let's get right to it. The Panama Canal's role in global shipping has only increased, as you know, given the disruption of the global supply chains. Even with the drought, the Panama Canal Authority's revenue hit a whopping $3.38 billion last year. Revenues have increased every year since 2017. They were increased again this year. Again, are the rates fair?
Well, I think that's a question for shippers. We don't really get into the rate structure. What we get into is more of how are the rates applied and are they applied equally? And I also think that we look a lot at what some of the auxiliary fees are. So as you look at the rates, I think the one thing that's very important to us at the Federal Maritime Commission is how much money is being generated off of the auction system.
Exactly. And we've heard, like last year, I reported on it. One of these slots was over $1 million. I mean, this is not chump change.
No, the slots are going up to $4 million. And to give you an example, the auxiliary fees that we call these, that the canal goes, that put into their financial statements, they reached $1.8 billion last year, where 4 or 5 years ago, that wasn't even $500 million. So it's been a triple increase in the amount of fees that the canal has been charging.
Has the Panama Canal Authority always been a for-profit entity, or has that changed over the years?
No, when the United States ran it, it was pretty much for just an operational. So in the 85 years the United States ran it, the United States gave the Republic of Panama $1.8 billion. In the 25 years that Panama's been running it, they're up to about $28 billion so far. So a little bit over $1 billion a year. Last year was $2.4 billion. So each year it seems that the government is asking for more money. The canal has to provide them with more money. And this is going on at the same time where major infrastructure investments are needed.
Now, the money, there's a lot of speculation out there in terms of where the money goes. There are stories out there. There's an audit going on right now with the controller. You touched on the money. In terms of last year, the government was given X amount billion dollars. There are stories out there that the government then in turn kicks back some of that money to some shippers as a way of paying them back, so to speak, for traversing, and that some of the speculations are that it's the Chinese ocean carriers. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? I know that you are close when it comes to what's going on right now with the Panamanian government and the new controller and president.
Sure. Well, let me say this, that we have got, and I just testified this on my hearing, we have got numerous complaints by passenger vessels that are asking for their tolls to be returned, which we found kind of odd. When we looked into it, there's an Executive Order 73 that says basically if you stop at this certain cruise port, which was built by the Chinese, I think it's in the news quite a bit, that you were able to receive 100% of your tolls back. So where the canal charges everybody the same, the government kind of picks who they want to give these tolls back to. So the reason that we became aware is because there were some U.S. passenger vessels that didn't get their money back. And so they're the ones that brought us this complaint.
Is that pro quo? Why are the Chinese getting preferential treatment then over American vessels or even other foreign flag vessels?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen canal fees being returned or refunded to go to one port or to another. It's definitely, I think, a very curious and also cautious for us to go ahead and look at that more.
In terms of the fees, a lot of this is also detrimental to the ag exporters. These are lower price goods, as you know. Bulk shipments were gravely impacted along with LNG, during the drought. LNG is still down. What are you hearing from these two critical U.S. exporters, if you will, these two components for our GDP in terms of getting access to the canal and these exorbitant fees?
Well, 75% of all the traffic in the canal is bound for our shores. So it's very, very important conduit for us. Um, who was complaining the most were the LNG, or the very expensive cargoes that were paying up to $4 million on addition to their canal fees to go through. So it could be up to $5 or $6 million for an LNG vessel to go through. And then who was also complaining about the auction slots were the agriculture, who didn't have the money to go ahead and pay for this. And a lot of them had perishable goods, and they were put into kind of a bind. So what I think caught the FMC's attention on this is that before there was maybe 20% of the slots that were available were for auction, and then it went to 30, and then it went to 35. So it seems that it becomes more of a money-making process rather than go ahead and first come, first serve, which is normal maritime law.
You know, in terms of all of this, we're really demanding transparency. Where are we in this game of transparency with the Panama Canal, as well as the Panamanian government, when it comes to these costs and when it comes to the impact it can have on U.S. trade?
Well, we have a very good relationship with the Panama Canal Authority. We were down there just last July and August. They were very forthcoming on these fees. They were very forthcoming on their need for additional water. And they were also very clear on some of the frictions that they have with the current government on how to get access to their watershed so that they have water for future operations. So I believe the transparency was very good.
You know, since Panama ended its diplomatic relations with Taiwan, Panama became a member of the Belt Road Initiative, and as a result, China's been able to secure a number of no-bid contracts with the Panamanian government. The most recent, of course, the building of the fourth bridge across the canal. You've spoken with the new Panamanian president and the controller who is reviewing these bids. Can any of these bids be overturned?
I'm not an expert in Panamanian law. I'm going to stick with U.S. maritime law. But I will say that we look at this in a commercial aspect, that a lot of these are subsidiaries. So why is one port being subsidized over another? Why is one company being given a $4 billion asset for essentially zero? You know, I believe that U.S. companies should be up to the standard and also be able to be given opportunities. But if this was an open bidding process, I don't think we would have this. We would even be having this discussion in the first place.
And this was all from the prior administration. So how can the new Panamanian government kind of square that circle, if you will, and kind of right the wrongs of the prior, the prior presidency?
Well, I think that this government that just took over power, I believe in August, is doing a very good job. They have what they call in Panama is a comptroller. So the comptroller is in charge of looking over all these contracts, and they just started an audit process. So I welcome the audit, and I look forward to see what the results are.
How long will the audit take? Have they given you any guidance?
No, we're not in direct conversations with them about the audit. We have nothing to do with the audit. We're just spectators, just like everybody else. But I want to be very clear on this, that, you know, when we're talking about the audit, we're also talking about the two ports that are owned by Hutchinson on the Atlantic and the Pacific. So these two ports in the last 20 years, they had 20 years where they didn't pay any zero rent. So, I mean, this is a subsidiary. So what are they doing? Who are they giving free services to? How come that they moved 100 million containers in 20 years and they didn't have any revenue? I mean, either they're Pinocchio, the earth is flat, or they're giving away their services.
You know, you pointed out, you know, quite rightly, when you look at both sides of that of the canal, these ports literally can either prevent or allow vessels from going in. And also to point out, these are former U.S. Navy bases. So these are former U.S. assets that the Chinese are now renting from the Panamanian government. You know, can the government actually step in, if you will, and declare a state of emergency and take the operating control back from these ports? What can be done? Because we have heard so much, at least I have, from operators, be it logistics and, you know, maritime, looking at the access to the port, and could China literally thwart the traversing of the canal?
That's a very good point. So both of these ports are in what we call the operational zone of the canal. So they are not able to operate unless the canal signs off on it, what they call a compatibility statement. And it's a very long and drawn out study. For example, one of the ports that when you pull a ship into the port, you're basically blocking traffic to go through the canal. So every time a ship comes in or goes out, they are disrupting the traffic into the canal. So who's going to have the ultimate authority, whether it's going to be the government to say that, hey, this wasn't a very good deal? After not paying for 20 years, they renewed the contract and said, now you have to pay $7 million a year for both ports. To give you some sort of context of how big these ports are, they are humongous. One of the ports is the size of the port of Houston. They move 4 million containers a year. The other port is the size of Miami. They use 1 million containers a year. And both of them together have a contract to pay $7 million a year on a direct concession, no bid, direct contract. So again, I am not in national security. I'm in economic security. So, what we see is that is a subsidiary that the Panama is giving to a Chinese company.
And that subsidy is big bucks. Can you tell the audience how much it would cost to be the operator of like the Port of Houston that you pointed out? Let's show the apples to apples.
The Port of Houston's run by a good friend of mine, Roger Gunther, and I believe that he had sales in excess of $1 billion last year. To give you an example, I don't know what his revenue was. I just read his annual statement just recently. And Heidi Webb down in Miami, who runs that port, I bet she does at least $200 million by running that port. So we're talking about a lot of money. These assets are definitely worth $5 to $7 billion. So the people at Panama are not getting anything for these two ports to be operating there.
Well, and it's also a labor concern as well, because when it comes to the port operation and the infrastructure and the building out, from what I have seen in reports, the Chinese are not hiring Panamanian longshoremen. They're bringing in their own. So there's also a labor issue there as well.
Well, I'm not sure about the longshoremen or the actual operation of the ports. But definitely the construction. First of all, the Chinese didn't have to build these ports. These ports were existing facilities. They were existing U.S. military bases. Yes, they had to put some cranes in. Maybe they had to put some other low infrastructure, but they didn't have to do anything major. But when the Chinese do a major infrastructure project, such as a bridge or something like that, they always ask for a clause in their contract where they bring in their own labor from China. I would imagine that it'd be a cheaper type of labor, and they also have a more controlled type of labor. And when they do that, they like to bring in sort of like these base camps where they like to go ahead and house all these people. And these base camps have guards on the front, and people cannot come in or have access one way or another. So I believe that's going on right now for what we call the fourth bridge over the canal.
There's growing concern of the independence of the Panama Canal Authority being threatened by the Chinese influence. You have very strong ties with Panama, both professionally and personally. You're the honorary lead pilot of the canal. Are you seeing anything that's concerning to you when it comes to this?
Every single day, I think that Panama over the last 5 years has inched closer and closer to China and away from the United States. One of the major problems is we have not been supporting U.S. companies in Panama for a long time. We support other types of initiatives, but supporting a U.S. company wanting to do infrastructure, I haven't seen it in a long time. I've seen China and Brazil take away, $20 billion worth of direct contracts. So we definitely need to at least have a game there. Naturally, the biggest problem in Panama, according to almost anyone you talk to, is corruption. So I believe the Chinese have a better ability to discuss a lot of these things with their Panamanian counterparts than the United States do. And what I mean by that is the United States companies are hindered drastically by Foreign Corruption Practice Act. So if the lights go out and I have to call somebody at 12 o'clock at night to come over and turn on my terminal, I cannot buy that person pizza under the Foreign Corrupt Practice Act. So we definitely have to ease some of our regulations that we're able to compete internationally.
The Army Corps of Engineers has been a vital component to the existence and the creation of the Panama Canal. When it comes to the Army Corps of Engineers and what they are doing now or what they're not doing now, are you seeing instances where that the Army Corps of Engineers have been thwarted or have been prevented, if you will, from obtaining opportunity when it comes to the Panama Canal?
Well, as far as the Army Corps of Engineers, they're working actively with the ACP and they're being paid by the ACP. But the Army Corps of Engineers is an engineering consulting group, basically, the best in the entire world that we have. So they are able to go ahead and provide these services. But what we're talking about is engineering procurement and construction contracting. And hopefully the United States will have these opportunities. I really hope that President Trump will go to Panama, the same as Theodore Roosevelt did, and he will not only go there with his diplomats and politicians, but he's going to go there with engineers, and he's going to go there with some of America's best companies that could provide some of these services.
Secretary Marco Rubio is going to Panama. I know that the two of you know each other very well. Did you have the opportunity to speak with him before he went on his trip? And what advice or whatever that you could possibly disclose to us of what you hope that he is able to achieve while he's there?
Well, first of all, I am not dialed into the administration or any of the negotiations or anything that they have with Panama. I run an independent agency here. Yes, I did see Secretary Rubio, and I congratulated him on being Secretary of State. And we kind of joked a little bit that, as you know, I supported him for president. And he told me he had the best job in the entire world right now. He does not want to be president.
I'm sure a lot of people will go with that sentiment. Now, for folks that are not aware, the FMC has the authority to issue substantial fines on a foreign government if it finds the laws or practices harmful to U.S. shipping. In the case of the Panama Canal and the fees, not only can you issue substantial daily fines, you could also bar Panamanian flags from calling U.S. ports. Have you had any discussions yet with the president of Panama over this?
About what our sanctions are, no. When we did go to Panama last year in August, we met with him. We talked about three different items. One was the fees on the Panama Canal. He referred us to the Panama Canal administration, who we met with. The second item that we talked to him about was there was an issue at the time with Panama was abiding Iran violate some of the sanctions with their tankers so that they were able to sell their fuel, and then they use that money, as you know, to fund Hamas and other type of things. The Panamanian president was very willing to act to go ahead and take what our U.S. Treasury Department, OFAC would for delisting some of these vessels quicker. And then the third thing that we talked about with the president of Panama was that we wanted to see more U.S. companies. And there's actually one or two U.S. companies that are trying to do business in Panama, trying to develop a $2 billion port with United States, with U.S. funds. And they're being blocked right now by a Chinese contractor. So we did bring that up to the president of Panama.
When it comes to what's going on right now about China's influence and things like that, does that fall under your jurisdiction as if you wanted to go forward and press as it relates to fines or preventing the Panamanian vessels from calling U.S. ports?
What I'm going to say is that we are economic security, not national security. So what we want to do is we want everybody to compete on a level playing field, including China. We want to compete with China. We want to compete with the entire world. But we want it on a level playing field. And if it's not on a level playing field, if they're going to give subsidiaries to Chinese vessels or subsidiaries to Chinese ports or other type of things, we have to see what's in the best interest of the U.S. shipper and to ship U.S. goods. And if that does become an issue, we do have all options on the table.
When it comes to business, you and I both know having an ambassador in that country is key. How confident are you with President Trump's pick and being confirmed and getting him to work in order to represent U.S. interests in Panama?
Well, Kevin is a friend. He's from Miami. I think he'd be a wonderful ambassador. Uh, Hopefully, he's not held up in the Senate. If we can get him there because of the urge and the need that we should get him confirmed as fast as possible. That was something that came up into the Senate hearing today about how the United States has a void and China has filled that void. The longer we do not have an ambassador, the more that we are at risk.
In terms of the new president of Panama, and the controller doing the audit, are you confident, based on the actions of them helping you when it came to taking down those Panamanian flags for the Iranian tankers, that they will work well with the Trump administration and President Trump in trying to level that playing field for American businesses in Panama and for fairer rates, which is, as you know, is something that he is looking into?
Well, I definitely hope so. The president of Panama did impress me as we were waiting in his office to meet with him, myself, with our official delegation. He was about 30 minutes late, and he was 30 minutes late because the election in Venezuela happened the day before, and he was breaking relations with Venezuela. So he definitely seems to be a pro-U.S. person. I know he also done a lot to stem immigration coming in through the Darien Gap, and I hope that he is a worthy diplomat when dealing with Secretary Rubio.
In terms of any upcoming projects, are there projects that are scheduled in the near future where there will be a bidding process? Are you aware of anything where possibly American companies will have that level playing field that you are strongly advocating for?
Yes, it was just in the newspaper that there's a train line proposed which will link Panama with Costa Rica. I know that there's countries from all over the world that are interested in developing that, including from the U.S. So it was very good to see a U.S. company actively go there and engage on that.
In terms of transparency, when you're looking at the money shifting hands from the Panama Canal to the Panamanian government, and then, of course, these reimbursements that we spoke about earlier, how transparent are they, and can they get better? And when do you expect to see, if anything, in terms of where money is changing hands and who is benefiting and who is not?
Let me say this. I find the entire practice alarming, that canal tolls would be refunded for any reason whatsoever, especially when Panama has a neutrality contract or neutrality clause in their treaty. So I think that they really need to take a look at that. What have they done before? And definitely, what do they want to do in the future?
I know you're not a foreign, a foreign policy person per se, but if they are in violation, and President Trump has talked about Chinese influence, he's talked about the unfair practices, and with this transparency, is there anything where that could the United States take back the Panama Canal, because you're seeing what's happening in terms of monies being misappropriated?
I don't know what the specifics of the treaty are. That's really not my realm. My realm is the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, and that means that the United States needs to be treated fairly around the world, not just the United States flags, but also the cargo, because 75% of the cargo going through the Panama Canal is destined for the United States. So who is ultimately paying for the additional increases is the United States shippers.
What I found really alarming when it came to the passing of the hands and certain certain companies getting back their money, a lot of people don't realize this. It's the U.S. shipper, the retailers out there, they pay the ocean carrier fees upon fees, like all the canal fees, all the transit fees, the service fees. The American shipper pays for that. And so the company that's getting, quote, the kickback from the Panamanian government, they're making even more money off of the backs of the American retailer.
And the American passenger as well, if you take passenger vessels, because if you're going to take a cruise through the Panama Canal, you're definitely getting charged for it to pass through there. To give you an idea, it depends on what size container ship is going through the Panama Canal, but you can probably add $50 to $60 per container for passing through there, and you can go ahead and figure out what the throughput is on any given day.
Luis Sola, Chairman of the Federal Maritime Commission, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Lorianne. A pleasure.